Welcome everyone to another video of answer writing program, mains answer writing discussion. Over here today we are going to deal with GS4 case studies. This is November, we are going to deal with GS4. So we were going to deal 12 case studies. Today we are going to deal the third and the fourth case study. Let us start with the very first case study. Let's read the case study together. The Supreme Court has ordered a ban on illegal fishing in the coastal water of India to protect the marine ecosystem. Despite the ban, illegal fishing operations are still prevalent in the coastal districts of the affected state, often with the connivance of the corrupt fishermen and politicians. The newly appointed collector in the affected district promised to himself to stop this menace. During one of his surprise check with his team, he found a fishing vessel loaded with illegal caught fish trying to escape the fishing area. He tried to stop the vessel, but the fishermen on board ran the vessel into the collector's boat, killing him on the spot, and thereafter managed to flee. The police filed the FIR, but no breakthrough was achieved in the case for almost 3 months. Rajesh, a freelance journalist, decided to take up the investigation and started by interacting with local people, fishermen, and government officials. He prepared his investigative story and presented it to the editor of a leading newspaper. He exposed in his investigative report the complete nexus of fishermen working with the blessing of corrupt police and civil officials and politicians. The politicians who was involved in the nexus was no one else but the local member of parliament, who was considered to be a very close associate of the chief minister. Upon reviewing the investigative report, the editor advised Rajesh to drop the idea of making the story public through newspaper. He informed Rajesh that the local MP was distant relative of the owner of the newspaper and that his further promotion and hike in pay would be taken care of if he hands over the investigative report to him. So in this case study, you will understand there is a specific set of problem. The problem is that certain illegal activities are happening, and that is because of certain nexus. Now, a collector tried to break the nexus down but was unfortunately killed in the action. Now, the entire scenario talks about how it's difficult to break the nexus. At the same time, even people who make certain effort, who are in the position of power, face a lot of resistance. So over here, when we are talking about the case study, we are now going to empathize with Rajesh and we are going to solve the question over here. Rajesh, who is a freelance journalist, who figured out the entire nexus and created the report. Unfortunately, that report faced a lot of hurdles as well. So you have to understand the case study, what exactly is the problem. You will figure out what are the alternative options and solutions that are available for the case study and understand merits and demerits of the same and thus give an opinion. So basically, for this case study, we are going to check for the ethical dilemmas faced by Rajesh. What are the options available to Rajesh to cope up with the situation, and we'll critically evaluate each options. And thirdly, we are going to check out for the options which we think the most appropriate option for Rajesh to adopt, and we'll give reason for the same. So firstly, whenever you face case study, you have the option in the introduction to give the overview of the scenario. So firstly, we shall give overview in intro. If there is explicit demand of the stakeholder, then you definitely write the stakeholder in that specific section of the answer. However, if there is no explicit demand of the stakeholder, you can skip it, but giving a minor idea about the stakeholder to just mentioning of the different aspects in a mind map form would be great, because that way you will establish the perfect overview for the person who is going to check your answers. So, overview plus stakeholders. In the second part, we are going to see different options and we are going to see the merits and demerits of the same, because we have to critically analyze each options, and at the end we will finally choose one option which will be the most appropriate, and in the conclusion we will be talking about what exactly a civil servant can learn from this entire case study. So that is something which is the overview of the answer. Now, let us firstly understand what exactly we mean by overview. Overview basically refers to the fact that you are summarizing the crux of the case study. So let us break down the case study in a timeline form so that we can understand what exactly is happening. Firstly, we have ban, but despite that, we are looking at fishing, and that is because of nexus. Collector comes in the picture, but is unfortunately killed. Now, Rajesh, who is a freelance journalist, he intervenes and creates a report. However, that report also faces a lot of resistance because of the nexus. You have multiple issues with the nexus. You can see different hurdles such as politicians. We have MP. Apart from that, we also have people who are very close to Chief Minister, exactly the MP. There are corrupt policemen, civil officials. So you do understand that there are a lot of hurdles. And also one more thing, the MP, the local MP that we are talking in the picture is also distant relative of the owner of the newspaper. Therefore, the press will also become the part of the nexus. So that way you will understand the entire scenario, and then we have to talk about the solutions. So this is what exactly is the overview. Let's start the answer. In the introduction, you can summarize that overview. You can talk about the above case study talks about the nexus that kind of create a lot of hurdles for officials as well as for normal citizens to operate, where rule of law is something which we have to uphold. So that is something in the overview you can talk about. You can give a brief idea of all the stakeholders involved. You can talk about the Rajesh. Over here, as the explicit demand is not to mention the stakeholder, you can just create a simple mind map with stakeholder at the core and then just list down all the stakeholders like Rajesh, the freelance journalist, the local MP and other politicians who are part of the illegal fishing nexus, the corrupt policemen and officials, the chief minister of the affected state, as he is also indirectly involved because that person has authority and he might definitely favor a person who is a relative of his own. Then next are the fishermen involved in the illegal fishing operation. Now you do have to understand they might be involved in a way either through force or through their own motives. So they are also part of this entire stakeholders. They might be part of the nexus. At the same time, they might be also not culprit because of the fact that they might be forced to do so. Then the local people of the affected district where the illegal fishing is happening, and the newly appointed collector who took the initiative to fight this nexus. But unfortunately, he was killed. So that is something in the introduction you can write. Now, let's go to the first demand, which is the ethical dilemma that faced by Rajesh in this situation. Over here, this is something which you will cater in the body, which is the first heading that you're gonna tackle. So you can list down 4 different ethical dilemmas that Rajesh faced, because Rajesh is given here options as in either to drop the investigative report, give it up, or to uphold the justice and fight the nexus. So very first ethical dilemma that Rajesh faces is reporting truth versus suppressing the story. Through reporting truth, he might be able to expose the nexus, he might be uphold the rule of law, but through suppressing the story, he might also have the advantage to gain professionally. Second, upholding justice versus personal safety. Upholding justice as in by realizing the rule of law, he will be able to expose the nexus, he will be able to again curb the illegal fishing issue. But at the same time, there is also issue of personal safety. Now when we hear nexus, we have to understand that they can also commit similar kind of crime that the collector faced. The third is protecting public interest versus professional advancement. Now over here, by exposing the nexus, by making sure the ban on illegal fishing is realized, he'll definitely uphold public interest as the local population is facing the torture of the illegal fishing. But at the same time, he also have an advantage. If he drops the investigative report, he can gain professionally a lot. He can definitely gain promotion in the organization as well as full-time employment over there. Lastly, independence and integrity versus conflict of interest. Now, independence and integrity, which are bedrock of media, they cannot be against such values because of the fact that they are directly feeding information to the public. By depriving the same, they are breaking the fundamental vows of media journalism. So that is something over here. But however, if Rajesh violates that law, there is conflict of interest over here as he is also gaining for his private career, professional career, that's it. So that is for the ethical dilemmas you can write in the heading 1 of the body. Now let us see the second aspect, which will be our heading 2. The second aspect is what options are available to Rajesh to cope with the situation, critically evaluate and examine each of the options. Now whenever you are looking for options, you have to understand that you cannot deal by distancing or alienating the person involved in the case study. There are instances in the case study where you have to deal with a third person, like in this case study, Rajesh. We are trying to help from the perspective of Rajesh, and there are case studies where you are explicitly given the part to decipher, as in you are being appointed as collector exactly like that. But over here we have a third person. You have to initiate with certain degree of empathy. You have to empathize with Rajesh. You have to understand what he's feeling and what are his options. So you have to give 3 options, as in 2 extreme side options and 1 middle path, as in 1 pragmatic path, right? The option 1 over here, we can decipher the same, is Rajesh can decide to heed the editor's advice and hand over the report to MP. Now in this option, Rajesh is looking for easy path. He is making sure that he is not going for any trouble and making professional advancement. So there are certain merits and demerits involved here. So merits, he will be definitely getting a lot of professional benefits, as in job, promotion in that specific newspaper agency. He will be also safeguarding his life, his family's life, because a nexus involved who have already killed the collector of that region. So Rajesh is definitely vulnerable over here. At the same time, there are demerits over here, which are exactly what we discussed in the ethical dilemmas, that he is giving up on choosing the path of justice, of morality. He is definitely going against public interest. There is definitely conflict of interest. So all of them would be in the demerits. As we have to critically evaluate, we will be looking the pros and cons, the merits and demerits of every option. Now second option, instead of heeding to the advice of the editor and giving up the report, Rajesh can choose to disregard the editor's advice and publish the report in newspaper. Over here, the very fundamental merit is he is going to uphold rule of law. He is going to expose the nexus. He is going to make sure that the report reaches to specific authority and actions are taken. Basically, he is upholding the foundational values of media and journalism, which is integrity. However, there are certain demerits. If we look at from Rajesh's side, he will definitely be facing a lot of safety issues. There are definitely certain blockades with respect to his career advancement. So personally over here, Rajesh has to lose a lot. And apart from that, you also have to understand, if that nexus is so powerful that the MP which is involved is a distant relative of the CM, there is good possibility that despite exposing that report, the report might not see the light of the day. That means there is a good possibility that report might get eclipsed. So that is also a demerit over here. So all the efforts and all the possibility of gain will be lost. So that is something in option 2 you can see. And the next option, which is something you have to think as a innovative idea, as a pragmatic idea, where there is win-win situation. So over here, Rajesh can reach out to other media houses and journalists to bring their attention to the case and demand justice for the collector. Over here, Rajesh is being smart. Instead of just putting his egg in one basket, he is diversifying. He is giving out the report to multiple agencies. That way, he will get the light. Also, he will make sure that public will know that there is a nexus, there is certain involvement of political people as well as bureaucratic officials and policemen. That way, Rajesh will definitely ensure that he can safeguard his life of family and himself, as well as other media house will be also looking for that kind of talent who has that kind of integrity as well as analytical ability to complete the investigative report. So that is the way a possible situation can arise. And thus the last option, which option would you think would be the most appropriate, is something we'll be talking about, option 3. Now you have to do understand that when this kind of format of question arises in the case study, you have to choose the option that you have given in the second part, right? You cannot innovate, or you cannot newly give a very new option in this part, because why would you do so, right? You have already given an option over here. You will be choosing from the same option. Otherwise, why would you even recommend the same? So option 3 over here would be the most ideal option, and we have to talk about why aspect. So over here, you list down the benefits of the option 3 and you will talk about why exactly those options are very beneficial. Now, with respect to the why, you can talk about the diversification, you can talk about how it will protect him from the nexus as he will be in the limelight with respect to the public interest. The third reason you can talk about that how exactly he will get opportunities, because now a lot of people know about his talent and his ability to do such kind of investigative reporting along with strong integrity and morality. So these are the kind of why that you can explicitly write in this part of the answer. Coming to the conclusion over here, as it's a case study, if you have seen, case study always involves certain kind of learning, the crux of it. So you can talk about how exactly this case study helps you so that you can become a great civil servant. So you can talk about that investigative intelligence, the kind of analytical ability, the kind of morality and integrity that Rajesh is showing through his pursuit for justice should definitely be in parallel with the foundational value of civil services. We have honesty, we have integrity, we have listed down multiple foundational value. Thus, a civil servant should understand that public should be the center of his actions, and he must be resourceful in a way that whenever there are certain kind of nexuses or challenges involved, he is always ready with solutions which can not only safeguard himself, herself, but also safeguard the public interest. So those are the type of conclusions that you can imbibe in your case study. So this is it for question number 1. Let us see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. So firstly, in the introduction, we can talk about the overview of the entire case study. You can talk about the nexus. You can talk about the courage of the collector. And you can talk about that Rajesh and his investigative report to expose the unethical behavior of different stakeholders. Then you can list down the stakeholder. As we mentioned, if it's explicitly asked in the question, you definitely give it. You will be rewarded for the same as in the marks. But if it's not asked, you can draw a small mind map just to make sure you give the evaluator, the person who is going to check your answer, a complete picture in the introduction itself. Next, in the demand 1, which is you're going to be heading 1 of the body, there are ethical dilemmas. You list down all the ethical dilemmas. You give explanation in 2-3 lines. You can do the same for different points. In the heading 2, you have to talk about different options available along with their merits and demerits. You can create a table so that it becomes easy for you to explain each option. Then the third is path that Rajesh should choose. Over here, you can list down the option and why exactly that option is most suitable over here right now. You can give the rationale for the same, and at the end, you can talk about how this helps a civil servant with respect to reflecting their beliefs as in morality in their service. So that is something for question number 1. Let's move to question number 2. Question number 2. Let's read the question together. You are heading the medical relief operation in an area affected by an epidemic. Thousands of people have been infected with the virus and deprived of basic medical care. Relief work has been disrupted by the government's decision to impose a curfew in the affected area. The local people are desperate for medical help and are getting increasingly frustrated with slow and inadequate medical assistance. Now, when your team arrives, some of the local express their anger by assaulting and attacking some of your team members. A few of your team members are severely injured and they needed to be hospitalized. In fear of your team members asked you to call off the medical camp as there was threat to their life. But as a government official, you need to fulfill your duties and have to carry on medical relief camp. So this question is basically directly asking you to be a person who is going to solve the problem. There are certain questions that we are going to cater in this. Firstly, you are asked course of action. So you as a person who is responsible for managing the entire operation, what is going to be your course of action considering all the problems that are in place? And also you have to go a little bit deeper and understand what kind of quality that you must possess so that you can come up with the best possible course of action. So that is something you have to cater in your answer. But let's understand, before we dive deep into the answer, understand what exactly the structure needs to be, right? So in the introduction, you will be giving the overview, as there is no explicit demand of the stakeholder, but despite that, you might give a simple mind map so that there is explicit understanding of what exactly the scenario is. In the body part, you have to list down the course of action. Now see, it's very important in the introduction itself you define the problem, so that when you are jumping to the body, the heading 1, which is the course of action, you can delineate each problem in a way that you are giving up the solutions for every problem in a way that you are talking with a priority. So that is something in the body heading 1 you're going to do. In the heading 2, you have to talk about the qualities that you need to handle such situation and why. So we will be talking about specific quality, we will be giving the substantiation for the same, and if it's possible, you can give how exactly that quality will help you with respect to the problem in just 3 to 4 lines. So that is something which you can do in heading 1 and heading 2. In the conclusion, again we are going to apply the rule, which is learning for the civil services. How exactly, when you are in multi-dimensional situation where the pressure is beyond your control, and despite that you are solving issue, so you need certain qualities, you need certain foundational values in place, and how exactly as a civil servant you can solve such issues. We have seen in newspapers most of the time there are multiple kind of situations which are forcing the person who is taking the responsibility to act in a way, but the person have to make sure his wisdom is in the right place and he acts in a way that is a win-win situation. So that is something you can write over here. Now let us first see what is the overview with a timeline. Firstly, you are heading a medical camp, right? Medical relief operation in an area affected by epidemic. And we do understand there are thousands of people who have been infected with virus and deprived of medical care, the deprivation. Lastly, the relief work has been disrupted because of curfew, right? And because of that kind of disruption, we have a frustrated local population which have assaulted members of your team who are taking the responsibility of the medical relief operation. And because of that assault, the team is asking you to call off. And now you, as an official, it is your responsibility to take care of the entire medical relief operation. So that is something to give you a brief idea. Now let's go to the introduction part. In the introduction part, you can talk about the overview of the scenario, that the above scenario reflects that how operationally there can be multiple hurdles while taking care of any specific program, and at that place a civil servant must have certain degree of proactiveness as well as resourcefulness to ensure they also safeguard their team's health. At the same time, they also make sure that the public health is in place. So that is something in the introduction you can write. In the stakeholder map, you can talk about the civil servant, as in you, the local public who is facing the kind of issues with respect to the curfew as well as the problem of epidemic, the medical relief team that you are leading, and government officials who are going to support the entire operation. So that is something you write in the stakeholder. Now let us jump to the very first heading. The first heading is asking you to do course of action. Now you have figured out different problem issues, right? Medical relief camp, epidemic, disruption because of the curfew, assault of team members, and lastly, it's your responsibility. So very first thing that you are going to take care is something which is in your control, which is the possible thing that you can do at the first instance is camp security measures. Now security measures as are 2 layers. First, we are going to talk about the security of the team members so that they can make sure the relief work is in place without any hurdle. Now we are also talking about security of the people because they are right now facing the issue of epidemic. So dual security we are going to talk about in the first point. Second is provision of protective gears. Now through provision of protective gears, we are being resourceful. As there is issue of curfew, the resources face a lot of hurdles with respect to the logistic aspect. Then over here we are making sure either through innovation of the local population or through the resources which we can gather from the local population. First, we are going to gather the protective gear so that the issue of epidemic, as in the expansion, the number of sick people is not there. Thus, provision of protective gear. Second is establishing communication with local authorities. Now, local authorities, they do understand the hierarchy of local population. Who is a responsible person, who raises the voice and who leads the mass. So that way, firstly, they can ensure proper communication line and make sure the agitation of the community which is facing the issue of curfew and health is slowly toned down. Thus, communication links are kind of the primary thing that an individual in such kind of problem should establish. Fourth is prioritizing relief efforts. Now, as the population is agitated because of the halt in relief work, prioritizing it will definitely make sure that the local community is not that aggressive. Fifth is negotiating and addressing local concern. Now, apart from medical relief issue, local population might also be facing other basic necessity issues because of the curfew. So, making sure their concern is in right place, you are ensuring safeguard of your team members as well as of the community. Over here, you have to instigate a very specific value, which is tactical empathy, which we'll definitely talk more about in the second part, but that is something with which you have to operate. The sixth is public awareness and education. When we are talking about public awareness and education, we are ensuring that people should also understand that the team is facing hurdles because of the curfew. So, whatever anger they have with respect to the halt of relief team, it should not be directed towards the team member, so that team member can ensure they are continuing the relief work. At the same time, you should also make them aware with respect to the epidemic, as because of the epidemic, they must keep certain kind of social distancing and thus not get directly involved into any kind of conflict. And lastly is ensuring safe access to medical care. Now over here, we are making sure that the medical team is also in place. Medical care, as in other resources which are required for the relief team, is also in place. So this is the course of action through which you can definitely resolve the issue. This is something which you can inculcate in the heading 1 of the body. In heading 2, you talk about the qualities needed to handle such situation. Firstly, you need empathy for the affected people. You have to understand what kind of issues they are facing, not at the medical level, but also at the survival level. Because of the curfew, they are facing also issues with respect to accessing the basic needs. So that's why they are agitating. You have to also understand that that entire population will be having a lot of vulnerable population as well. They might be vulnerable with respect to health or other factors. And thus, empathy is the first thing that as a quality, the person who is handling situation must have. Second is leadership skills. Over here, the person have to lead the entire team as well as establish communication lines so that he or she can interact with the entire population over here and ensure there is win-win. So instead of going back and pushing the team to take the decision, a leader must take proactively those responsibility and ensure the relief work is a success. Third is communication ability, to ensure they are able to persuade the population from giving up the aggressive tendencies. Fourth is problem solving capabilities. Now over here you have to be innovative, problem solving capabilities, making sure you are resourceful, you are ensuring that local communities, their resources can be also used. Thus, when you are in certain situation where you are facing resource crunch, at the same time agitation, conflict, your problem skills will be very helpful. And lastly is organization skills. Now organizational skills are multi-layered skills, wherein a single individual might be also organizationally perfect, as in he may be able to organize his work or their work. But at higher dimensions, you have to ensure that every individual in your team is able to understand what exactly is happening. There's proper transparency in communication. At the same time, people are also able to understand that how you're functioning. That exactly is organizational skill. You have seen various examples at multiple layers, multiple places, like citizen charter. Now that is also an organizational skill from the institutional setup, that they are able to give the people overview of the idea. So those kind of skills should be in place. A person who is in charge must be able to think in such a way that every individual is able to see what exactly is happening in that specific problem. So that is there for the heading 2 of the body. Now let's go to the conclusion. Over here, we're going to write the learnings for civil services. Over here, you can specifically inculcate how exactly a civil servant should perceive any problem, and those skills that we talked about, the qualities, should be in parallel with the foundational values of civil services. So that is how you're going to end this case study. You can also imbibe the emotional intelligence factor, as in understanding your emotions when there is certain kind of agitation happening. You can also understand other people's emotion. So emotional intelligence can also be very crucial quality. You can inculcate the same in the heading 2 of the body, as well as you can conclude the same in the answer. So that is there for question number 3. Let's see the model answer and understand how can we inculcate the same in our answer writing practice. So in the introduction, you talk about the brief idea of the case study. You talk about the different stakeholders that are involved in the case study. Then in body, the heading 1, you directly deal with what exactly is going to be the course of action in a priority way, so that you can give a very explicit idea that how exactly you're going to deal with such problems. Then in the heading 2, you talk about the qualities. You list down the qualities, you give the justification for the same, and at the end, you talk about how exactly it's important for civil servants to have certain qualities and how exactly it helps them with respect to the service. So that is there for question number 2 case study. Your writing for answer writing program. I wish you happy Diwali. May light be with you. Keep writing, and thank you so much.